It can be for a parent to lose a child. It could take months, even years, to come to grips with the loss. And in some cases, the trauma is so severe that special help is needed. New Jersey resident Stephanie Muldberg is sharing her very personal story to help others.
My son Eric loves sports. He was a funny little boy. He had a lot of friends. He was really kind and sensitive, and he was a happy child. Eric had a wonderful relationship with his sister. They were just 18 months apart, and they spent a lot of time together, and Lauren idolized Eric, so whatever Eric did, she wanted to do. We initially found out that Eric was sick a few weeks after he got home from sleepaway camp. He was away for 7 weeks, and he came home, and when he got home, he was complaining about pain in his hip. But then a couple of weeks later, it started to become more and more painful. We took him to the doctor. It was a tumor. It was stage 4 metastasized Ewing sarcoma bone cancer that had metastasized to his bone marrow. And we had a long road ahead of us. And I just couldn't believe that the diagnosis of cancer, I mean, kids just don't get cancer. So I sort of just had to move into a different gear. And there were so many doctors that we had to speak to. And I was Eric's advocate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My husband and my daughter didn't believe that Eric was going to die. For me, it was different. I thought that he was going to die when we got the diagnosis. And then the last day, he really didn't speak at all. And Eric's laying down, and it's about 10 o'clock at night, and I get into bed. And I'm looking at him like I always did, and I spent a lot of time just staring at him. And then I heard this really deep breath. And it was almost like he was just trying to keep on breathing. But actually, it was just, saying, I can't do this anymore. And that was Eric's last breath. Well, there was a lot of planning after Eric died, and the funeral was just 2 days later. And we sat Shiva, and there were a lot of people around. But shortly after that, when everybody sort of leaves, and my daughter went back to school, my husband went back to work, I was home by myself a lot. And I didn't know what to do. And everything was foreign to me because for 16 months, I didn't do very much but take care of Eric. And I didn't know how to sort of readjust to a life and to re-engage in life again. And my days were very, very long, and there was no structure to them. And what happens with people that have a difficult time adjusting to after their loss is that they feel like they get stuck in time, that their grief is not progressing. And my grief wasn't progressing.
Stephanie was suffering from a condition called complicated grief. It's an intense form of grief that needs specialized treatment. And with us this morning is Stephanie Muldberg and Dr. Katherine Shear, founder of the Complicated Grief Program at Columbia University. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your very personal story with us. Let's talk about how you even were diagnosed, because it was a long road to even get there.
It took me 4 years to get diagnosed. Actually, it was my daughter. She had been seeing a doctor who had seen Dr. Shear lecture at Columbia University. And Lauren's doctor recognized that I had many of the symptoms that Dr. Shear had been describing in complicated grief. And she asked Lauren if I could, she can contact me, and she did. And then the following week, I had an appointment, and I met Dr. Shear.
Dr. Shear, let's talk about the difference between complicated grief and the grief that many of us are familiar with.
Yeah, so I think it's useful to think about loss, losing a loved one, as being a little bit like getting a serious physical wound, in that there's a natural healing process that occurs, and it's painful, but the pain diminishes as the healing goes on. And sometimes we know a wound can get complicated, right? There can be an infection or trouble with the vascular supply or something like that. And when that happens, you have to treat the complication to let the wound heal. And the same thing can actually happen with grief. It can get complicated so that it doesn't do that natural healing.
And Stephanie was talking about some of the symptoms that, and we put those up on the screen. There are so many different symptoms. Stephanie, let's talk about how the treatment has helped you. It's a 16-week program?
Yes.
Well, it was very time limited and very structured. And I had been in therapy before, but I was avoiding talking about the most difficult things, and that was my loss. And when I met Dr. Shear, there was she was very guided, and she kept me on track. And I did imaginal revisiting exercises and conversations, and those were really two very helpful tools for me. It helped me progress, and I was so fearful that I was going to forget Eric and the memories that I had of him.
And Doctor, the person who's going through complicated grief, I'm guessing that person very often does not recognize it in themselves. What advice do you have for people around them that may see it?
Well, you know, people gather around people after they lose someone close. They just do that naturally, and they provide a lot of support and, you know, emotional and practical support. And they don't expect it to be over right away, but, you know, when people notice when someone else is, you know, months and months have gone by and someone is still experiencing intense emotions, and it's disrupting their lives, and their natural inclination at that point is to say, you know, honey, I know this was hard, but, you know, it's time to move on and put this behind you. But we can't put a loss behind us. We have to learn to live with it. And so, you know, really what other people need to realize is that when a person isn't doing that, it's not because they don't want to. It's because there's something really stopping them. And that's, you know, that's when they kind of need help, rather than just pushing, you know.
Well, Dr. Shear, thank you for the help and for all the work you do. And Stephanie, you were saying that Dr. Shear really saved your life.
She gave me my life back.
So, thank you. Now, for more information about complicated grief, head over to our website, cbsnewyork.com. We're back in a moment.